Which Big Ten teams will exceed or fall short of expectations this football season? Find out next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deeper in the corner. Waits for it. It's caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And the leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wall of him, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Ron Robinson and Michigan.
The MVP in today's ball game. You want to know who it is? I'm standing alongside his granddaddy, quarterback Brian Greasy of Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace, and welcome to this week's edition of the Michigan Podcast, which is going to be even more jam-packed than it typically is because no episode next week with the 4th of July Independence Day weekend holiday. So we've got 2 weeks worth of work to get into this week's edition. But hey, as Coach likes to say, who's got it better than us? Thank you for checking us out here on YouTube. If you like us, click the little thumbs up there on the video, share the link, subscribe to the channel, help us to get the word out. Also, you can subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And again, we can't urge you enough. Please keep sharing those links if you like what we're doing here on the Michigan Podcast. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast as well. So a ton to get to this week. We'll talk a lot of basketball, but we begin with football. Hard to believe, but training camp, it's only about a month away. Michigan opens up camp on July the 31st, so just about 34 days from now, at the time we're taping this, it begins. Full-on preparations for 2017, and that means a lot of people are getting out their predictions, including the people that know more about this than anybody else, and those are our friends out in the desert. They have determined over-under win totals for both Michigan, but also the other 13 teams in the Big Ten. And as my 10-year-old son likes to know, why do we have 14 teams in the league called the Big Ten? Don't ask, kid. Just go with it. So what are those over-under win totals, and which team will meet those expectations, exceed them, fall short? We're going to go through all 14 teams in the Big Ten and tell you right now. In alphabetical order, we begin with Illinois. And listen, I'm kind of a college football idiot savant, as my wife likes to tell me. If she didn't have my 3 kids, she would swear I'm the 40-year-old virgin, okay? But even my idiot savantness is challenged. I'm not sure I could name 5 players on the Illinois team. So when I see their over-under win total is at 3.5, I see how bad they were a year ago. That half means, is there a better chance they get 4 wins, or is there a better chance they get 3? I think there's a much better chance they get 3 instead of 4. So we're going under with the Illini, even though I love Lovie Smith. I think he's a great coach, love what he stands for as a man. But he's got to show that he understands what it takes to coach and develop a college football program. It's not the same as the NFL. Now, I believe that if he is serious about being a college football coach and he puts the energy into it, given the recruiting base he has locally, the division he's in, I think he could eventually be very successful there at Illinois. But last year, Yikes, I'm not sure how that could have gone any worse than it actually did. So under, sad to say, even though I like me some Lovie Smith, under on the Illini. Next, Vegas wants us to take a look at Indiana. Now, the Hoosiers are a team I like a lot. And I think a lot of it's frankly influenced by how tough they've played the Wolverines the last 2 years. But I think defensively, this is going to be the best Indiana team in recent memory, although let's face it, that's not much of a compliment. But Tom Allen, the new coach, took over as the defensive coordinator last year and did a fine job. In fact, statistically, this was one of the best defenses that Illinois has fielded, that Indiana has put on the field since the Bill Mallory era in the late 80s and early 90s. And I like the schedule, and I think they have a quarterback that has some pro potential in Richard Legau. So I'm going over the 6.5, even though Indiana plays Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. They play Wisconsin from the West. I don't think they'll win any of those games. I think they might be able to beat Wisconsin at home. That's a potential upset alert from when the preview comes out later on. So those 4 games, they're clear underdogs. But I think they're clear favorites in the other 8. So I'm going over the 6.5 with Indiana. I think there's a better chance they get 7 wins than they just get the 6. Iowa is next. And this is a program that, of course, Michigan regrets losing to a year ago. Kirk Ferentz, the Hall of Fame coach, but I'm not sure how many guys in that Iowa squad last year that beat Michigan in that game would have started for Michigan. But one thing about Kirk Ferentz, is they're going to be tough. They're going to be physical. They're going to be competitive. There's also an interesting trend with Kirk Ferentz. You see 2 things at quarterback. The longer the longer a player tends to be a quarterback in his system, the less he tends to develop. Ricky Stanzi's really the only quarterback at Iowa that was better when he left campus than he was his first year as a starter. So they struggle to develop their quarterbacks there, but what they do very well is get them ready to start their first year. I think of when Jake Rudock had his first year. I think of C.J. Beathard, the kid who just graduated, with how well he played his first year as a starter back in 2015. They went undefeated, and now they're still trying to determine who the starting quarterback will be. But in Iowa, I think they do a much better job getting new quarterbacks ready to play than they do developing guys once they are prepared. They'll be physical. This won the award last year for the best offensive line in college football. Almost that entire unit returns. I think Akram Wadley could be a first-round draft pick at running back, but a ton of losses on defense, not a lot of weapons on the outside, and the schedule that has been in Iowa's favor the last couple of years, it works against them this year. Tough non-conference game at Iowa State, a place where better Iowa teams than this one have gone and lost. Most of their several tough games are on the road, and then you get Penn State and Ohio State at home, 2 teams where you figure even at home you're a double-digit underdog. I say all that to say, even though I love Kirk Ferentz as a human being, I think it's far more likely Iowa gets 6 wins than 8, so I'm going under the 7 for the Hawkeyes. Next, we take a look at Maryland. This over-under, frankly, shocked me. When you look at Maryland getting to a bowl game last year, the recruiting energy that DJ Durkin has, and he has assembled, and this class for 2018 may even be better than the one they had in 2017. I know they've got a tough non-conference game at Texas. You guys, if you watch this podcast, I think Texas is going to have a huge year in Tom Herman's first season, so they're not winning that game. I know they got to play Penn State. I know they got to play Michigan. I know they got to play Ohio State. Not sure they win any of those games, but I got to believe Maryland's over 3. In fact, when I saw that, I thought it was a typo. Okay, I just think DJ Durkin's too good of a football coach to see the Terps just completely fall apart after the progress they made in his first year. So I know what they say in Vegas. Whenever it looks like they're begging you to take a side, you usually end up begging for your money back after you do. So this looks so easy that I'm afraid. But I just can't believe, from what we saw from DJ the year he was at Michigan, the time he spent at Florida as the defensive coordinator there, the way he's recruiting at Maryland, I just can't believe they go under 3. In fact, I think they could very well get back to a bowl game again in year 2. So I'm going easy over for the Terps. Sparty is next. We're going to save Michigan for last. So Michigan State is next here on the over-under. The thing about Michigan State that I think a lot of people aren't saying enough, we're just now this offseason learning about all the off-the-field problems. This was not an issue in the media last year. This was not a public distraction for Michigan State last year. Now, clearly it was a distraction in the locker room, but that was inside baseball stuff. We didn't know about what was really going on. And some of this stuff hadn't even gone on yet that we do know about now. So I bring that up because last year, with everything they had going on, last year with everything that hadn't happened yet, they still went 3-9. Now, they were 3-9 before they had these problems. What are they going to be now that they are? Maybe 11 guys that should have been on the 2 deep for this year gone? So I'm not very optimistic about a big bounce back year for Michigan State. But an over-under of 5, that's probably what I think they'll end up getting is 5 wins. But I got to pick an over or under. So I guess I'll gamble on Mark D'Antonio and say there's a better chance he gets 6 wins than 4. But I think that total for Michigan State, I think 5 is right on the money. Minnesota is next. Love P.J. Fleck. Love his life story. I like the high energy he coaches with. And unlike Tim Brewster, who Minnesota kind of brought in with the same persona a few years ago, who was a bit of a clown, P.J. Fleck's actually built a program. I grew up in West Michigan, know the area well. A lot of people I went to school with back in the day ended up going to school at Western Michigan. Tony Kimbrough, remember that name? Just kind of pulled that out of my rectum. Tony Kimbrough was a quarterback for Michigan State for Western Michigan in the late 80s, which was the last time they were really a factor in the MAC. That's when the MAC champ used to go to the California Bowl. Remember those days? Of course you don't, because you have a life unlike me, so you remember stuff like that. But that's how long ago it was that Western Michigan was a factor in football. He made them a factor. He built a program. So much like Harbaugh, who I think because of his persona, people forget this dude knows how to coach this sport. The same is true with P.J. Fleck. He inherits a team, 14 starters back from a squad that won 9 games. I think it's more likely he wins 7 games, or more likely that he gets to 7 wins, though, than 8, because the schedule for them is also tough. And they don't have a quarterback right now. Are they going with a JUCO transfer? Are they going to play a freshman? So as much as I like P.J. Fleck, I think he gets Minnesota back in a bowl game. I think there's too many 50-50 games that when you're uncertain at quarterback can go against you. So I think 7-5 is probably what their record's going to be. So I will take the under the total with Minnesota. I think getting to 8 might be one rung on the ladder too high to climb. Following Minnesota, we look at Nebraska. Program still looking for an identity in the Big Ten since the move from the Big 12. What is their recruiting base? Now, they brought in Mike Riley from Oregon State because of his California recruiting ties. It took a couple of years, but starting with last year's class, and especially now the class that they're working on for this year, it looks like he's now beginning to open that pipeline. But talent-wise, I watched their spring game. And if to my untrained eye, you can visibly see a precipitous drop-off between the first unit and the second unit, just in terms of the way they played. They're breaking in a new quarterback. I'm not sure how great a transfer from Tulane can be. I don't know that that's your program saver, frankly. They're bringing in Bobby Diaco, switching to a 3-4 defense. Just a lot of questions there. And I think it's going to be tough for Nebraska to get that 7. In fact, I'm guessing that might be the lowest over-under win total for Nebraska in the history of Vegas. But I'm going under. I think it's much more likely Nebraska wins 5 or 6 games than they can get to 8. So I'm going under the 7 with the Cornhuskers. I still think they're about another year away from asserting themselves in the Big Ten West. They had a nice record last year, but they pretty much lost all the games that mattered the most to them. Northwestern is next, and if Nebraska has their highest over-under win total I can recall, this is probably, or the lowest I should say, this is probably the highest over-under for Northwestern since maybe the Damian Anderson days or the Darnell Autry days, when they were taking the purple to Pasadena. 8.5 for Northwestern. That's a tall drink of water. But I'm going over. I think there's a much better chance they win 9 games than 8. I think they will absolutely be a factor in the West. I think the West, you're going to see a lot of games in the Big Ten West this year that are 24-21, 21-17. And I think they've got the best offensive backfield in that division with Clayton Thorson, who really developed last year. Justin Jackson's the first 3-time 1,000-yard rusher in school history. With those two guys at the positions touching the football more than anybody else, I think that gives Northwestern a chance to win a lot of swing games this year and be the team that has that extra 3 or 4 points in a lot of games where the talent in that division is pretty even. Plus, I love Pat Fitzgerald, love the way he coaches. I'm going over on Northwestern. Wouldn't shock me if they got to the Big Ten championship game, in fact, for the first time in the history of their program. Ohio State is next. Monster number. They've lost 15 guys the last 2 years to the NFL that have left early. That's not counting guys that exhausted eligibility. That's just 15 guys that have left early. 10.5 is a monster number. J.T. Barrett showed last year has a ways to go now as a downfield passer. Not sure Mike Weber is really the answer, that playmaker that they are used to having. He's certainly not Carlos Hyde, nowhere close to Ezekiel Elliott. Still, I'm going over. I think there's a much better chance Ohio State ends up 11-1 or better, that they lose 2 games. So 10.5 is a monster over-under number. But when you look at Urban Meyer's career, when you look at the fact he is 61-6 in the Big Ten, when you look at the way they recruit, to me, I think it's an easy call, actually, to go over the total with Ohio State, even though I'm not exactly an Ohio State fan. Next up, Penn State. Came to the forefront last year. You know, after Michigan beat them 49-10, there was talk, hey, how many games James Franklin got to win to hold on to his job? Then they upset Ohio State in the rain, whiteout game, prime time. They win out from there, win the Big Ten. Magical year for the Nittany Lions, and they've gone from a middling program in the Big Ten to now one with an over-under of 10. That's a monster number. And I could see them getting to 10 wins when I look at their schedule, but I think it's far more likely that Penn State goes 9-3 than 11-1. So this is an easy under for me. And I wonder about Penn State as a program with these expectations, because these players for Penn State, you go back to the end of the Joe Pa era as we were first learning about Jerry Sandusky and what really went on there. Well, I mean, that was 2012. That's 5-6 years ago, guys. You know, the players coming into Penn State now, playing there now, 5-6 years ago, they were either not in high school or freshmen in high school or sophomores. They've never faced this kind of expectation preseason as a program. I would make the case James Franklin, his whole coaching career, has never had to deal with preseason expectations. Listen, winning 9 games at Vanderbilt is nothing to sneeze at. I'll give him props for that. But you know, there's no preseason expectations at Vanderbilt. Survive. The preseason expectation at Vanderbilt, don't get anybody killed. That's the preseason expectation at Vanderbilt. Let alone an over-under of 10. I will be fascinated to see how Penn State's players and coaches handle those expectations. So I'm going under. Now, I don't think it'll be way under. I just think it's much better odds they go 9-3 than 11-1. That brings us to Purdue. New coach there in Jeff Brom. That's the good news. He has a hook, something to sell with his air raid offense. And the last time Purdue went to an air raid offense, they had a guy named Joe Tiller. He went to a Rose Bowl, worked out pretty well. Bad news is it's all the same players. That's the bad news. So a 2.5 over under, that means, are there better odds, I think, that Purdue gets to 2 wins or they get to 3? I will give the slight nod on the over, that the Brom factor with the air raid offense, somewhere along the lines of the season, he sneaks up on somebody. David Blau throws 70 passes in a game, and they pull something out of their keister hole, and they get to 3-9. But the talent on this team is much closer to a team that would be 2-10. Brom has a major rebuilding project. Don't get me wrong. I love his style of play for a program like Purdue that needs a hook to recruit kids to, but he's looking at 2 to 3 years of recruiting. That brings us to Rutgers. Do we even need to do this? I mean, seriously. Has a team ever had 0 for an over-under? I doubt it. But come on, man. They're sorry. Now, Jerry Kill being brought in to be the new OC, I think that'll help Chris Ash. You know, interesting, true story, bro. I used to be good buddies with Chris Ash. I used to cover Iowa State football quite a bit because of where I live. He was the defensive backs coach there. Great guy, even though he ended up becoming a Buckeye. I want him to do well. I just don't see them winning more than 3 games. I think there's a much better chance they're 2-10 than 4-8. So I'm going under Wisconsin under the 3 with Rutgers. I can't believe Rutgers and Maryland have the same over-under. I thought for sure it was a typo. It's not. So under with the Scarlet Knights. That brings us to Wisconsin. They join Ohio State as having the second biggest over-under in the Big Ten. In fact, they're one of just 5 schools that Vegas has favored in all of their preseason point spreads for the games in the 2017 season. Here's my problem with Wisconsin. I think last year we overrated how strong the schedule was and the gauntlet they had to run. Don't take anything away from them, though. They did great, right? A lot of us thought they were going to go a month and a half without winning a game, and they won 11. I wonder if this year, though, we're underrating that schedule. You know, I mean, Alex Hornibrook had one good game last year. At the time, it looked great. Went on the road against Michigan State. Sparty was still ranked at that point in the season, and he looked great in his first start until Sparty's season bottomed out. Alex Hornibrook lost the job to the kid he had beaten out, Bart Houston. 10.5? Dude, that's a monster number. So I'm going to play the odds. I think there's a much better chance Wisconsin is 10-2 than 11-1. Plus, sneaky road game for the Badgers in September at BYU. BYU, a lot of kids that have gone on Mormon missions, 21, 22, 23, 24 years old. Physically, not your typical not group of five or independent non-power five team. They can probably stand up to some of the bullying and the physicality of a Wisconsin. That's a sneaky, tough road game for Wisconsin. I wouldn't necessarily just write that in as a win right now for the Badgers. And they got a lot of games on their schedule like that. So I'm going under with Wisconsin, although not that much under. Which brings us to our beloved Michigan Wolverines. Now, the over-under for Michigan is 8.5. So you have to ask yourself, do you think it's more likely Jim Harbaugh goes 8-4 in year 3 or 9-3 in year 3? I think it's just that simple. I think it's far more likely Jim Harbaugh goes 9-3 than 8-4. So I'm taking the over, and I'll make one more prediction. This is the lowest over-under you will see on Michigan the rest of Jim Harbaugh's time in Ann Arbor. In fact, mark the tape. Remember I said that. This 8.5 will be the lowest win total from Vegas you will see placed on Michigan for as long as Harbaugh remains the coach here. And I'm going over because I just think it's much more likely a coach and a staff of their caliber and a coach of his caliber gets to 9 wins than gets stuck at 8. So what do you think? Let us know. Follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. You can also like us on Facebook. When we come back, he is a bit of a legend in the Michigan fandom message board world. The one and only Dotman from GoBlueWolverine will join us. We'll talk what's going on with coaching upheaval with men's basketball. What kind of team will they have next year? And what's the energy level around the state regarding Michigan and how young that team is going to be on the field this fall? All that and more with Dotman in a moment.
Jumbo formation. They go heavy. Parry the setback. 3rd down and inches. Parry. Touchdown, Michigan. Wolverines win it.
Our guest this week on the Michigan Podcast probably needs no introduction if you have spent more than, 10 minutes in the Michigan message board fandom community. He's a bit of a legend when it comes to the online communities for Michigan fans. The one and only Dotman joins us, Mark Dotson from GoBlueWolverine. And Mark, it's an honor to have you with us here on the Michigan Podcast. Brother, how are you?
Actually, an honor for me, Steve. Thank you.
So, Mark, I know that you are a proud member of the basketball mafia, as you guys like to call yourselves online. So let's start there. Despite coming off a Big Ten championship season, John Beilein looking at another another complete overhaul as top 2 assistants of the coaching staff again this offseason. Are you surprised by this news? Or are you worried about it at all?
I'm not surprised. I'm not worried either. When you say basketball mafia, let me just tell you a little bit about how I got here. I started being a Michigan fan back in '75 when I was a student at the University of Michigan, and have been since then. I went through the Orr, the Frieder, the Fisher, the development of Chrysler, and then Chrysler becoming obsolete. The relative indifference to the basketball program, as in contrasted with the football program. I've seen coaches underpaid. I've seen coaches underappreciated. I've seen facilities that became essentially prehistoric, certainly outdated, and coaches leave for different reasons. If you understand that Orr left because he didn't feel like Michigan appreciated him, although he was wildly successful. Frieder was a little bit more insecure, but relatively successful, and didn't want to have anything to do with Bo being a strong leader. Left to go to Arizona State. So you got Orr going to Iowa State, and you got Frieder going to Arizona State. And you say, what the heck's going on with the Michigan basketball program that doesn't discourage people from leaving? So I've been there before. Part of and then the Tommy Amaker years when things just weren't necessarily going well at all. Thought he was on the brink of doing some nice things, but he never did it. He was still playing a little bit behind the eight, playing catch up anyway, because the facilities weren't where they should have been for the leaders and best, especially in contrast to the football program. So he was playing catch up. Beeline came in with an attitude that we got an upgrade. We got to get a commitment to upgrade, and he got a commitment from Bill Martin to go ahead and do the upgrades, and you see where we are right now. Mm-hmm. Beeline is a guy that I learned maybe after the second or third year never to underestimate. I don't care what kind of team he's got coming back. I don't care what kind of roster, what kind of players he has composed on the roster. I don't care what kind of success they've had in previous years. He has always found a way to be successful, even in situations where I didn't think they had very much talent. He has actually upgraded the talent considerably over the last couple of years, to the point right now where I'm thinking, okay, they can make runs even in situations where they should I say there's little expectation that they will make runs. So to get back to answering your question, no, I'm not concerned. The man finds a way to make things happen. He will hire at least one coach and probably two, and I think we'll be happy with both of them. I spoke to him a little bit this past weekend about this, and he indicated to me that he was confident that that there was enough interest being shown that people would be satisfied with the new hires. He also mentioned though that he doesn't want just a recruiter. He doesn't want one-dimensional guys. He doesn't want someone who's just a coach. He doesn't want someone who's just a recruiter. He wants guys that have multiple abilities and skill sets. So I do think perhaps more so than any other season, Steve, that this roster, I'm intrigued by what he may do with this team, because I think the departure of DJ Wilson creates a major void.
I want to talk about this coming season's team in a moment, but on the assistant coach thing, you have Jerry Meyer leaves, joins LaVall Jordan. Obviously, they used to coach together at Michigan. LaVall's the head man there. So, there's a relationship there. Billy Donlin has personal ties to both Chris Collins and Northwestern. So there's a relationship there. So this isn't the normal upheaval you see for a team, especially a team coming off a Big Ten championship in the Big Ten tournament. But when you mention we're going to be really happy, any names out there yet? Anybody? Because there was speculation a year ago about Billy Donlin for weeks before he actually was formally announced. So through the grapevine at all, Mark, are there any names out there you're hearing that are interested in this job?
Great names at all. I've had a couple of people contact me that express an interest in the position, but I haven't heard any names coming from the Michigan side whereby and let me answer that in a different way. I have not heard any names. If I had heard some names, I'd be cautious in releasing those publicly, but I haven't heard any names. Okay. I would imagine there's still, if you know John Beeline, Steve, he's a very guarded person, and I really don't think there's going to be anything coming out of his mouth anytime soon. And then when something does, it's going to be undercover, under cloak and dagger, because he just doesn't operate publicly that way. And he's very cautious about information that he releases. So but I haven't heard anything. I had heard Donlin and I had heard Sadi well prior to their actual announcements, and I imagine that this will follow a similar course. That there will be a process, there will be a commitment, and that's when we'll learn about it. And maybe a week or two after there's been a commitment, that information will come out publicly.
Next season's team, I thought if DJ Wilson came back, And when I say this, I mean in terms of parts, not overall talent. But I thought if DJ Wilson came back, this might have been the best starting 5 of the Beeline era. Now, it's not the 2013 team with 6 pros on it.
Careful now.
All right, but in terms of the way the pieces fit, a true 4, a true 5, a true 1, that I think that you would have seen more of a traditional starting 5 than we've seen in the Beeline era in terms of how the pieces fit and worked together. You mentioned Wilson going pro, and props to him. Got a big payday, 17th pick in the draft, way ahead of where anybody projected when he announced that he wasn't going to come back. But now where do you think that void leaves this team? All those other pieces are still there. I know they're relying a lot on Simmons, the grad transfer from Ohio. The expectations for him are very high. But is somebody like Mo Wagner, for example, is he going to be ready to now be the number 1 option that other teams game plan for, as opposed to the guy that comes on late in the year and maybe surprises some people while they're game planning for Zach Irvin or Derek Walton?
That's a great question. With DJ coming back, they would have been interesting. I don't know if I necessarily agree with, and now that I think about it, probably his most talented lineup, short of the 13, maybe 14 teams. All right. DJ creates a void because Mo was good because of DJ's presence on the court. They could take Mo away from the basket because they could count on DJ to protect the basket and get rebounds. Now that's gone. Mm-hmm. That's going to make that's going to make Mo Wagner less effective. Instantly going to make him less effective. DJ could shoot it from deep. That opened up the court a little bit more again for Mo. Mo could take it out top. Now Mo is going to have to be more proficient in his mid-range game, I think, to be successful. I would not dismiss the possibility that he will develop that. I will not dismiss the possibility that he might be the kind of player that teams prepare for, given the way he is, given his current trajectory. But I got to see it before I'm going to believe it. Derek Walton leaving creates a major void. Simmons seems like he's going to be at least an adequate replacement for Derek. I don't have any confidence in the point guard position after that. Mohammed Rahman, he's going to be more consistent, and he's going to have to keep it mentally. He's going to have to be tougher for him to be on the court as much as Michigan's going to have him on the court. I'm confident in Matthews coming in. I like his game a whole lot. I've been told since he's been there that he's the best player on Michigan team, and that includes the guys that includes Wilson, that includes Wagner, that includes Irvin, that includes Derek Walton. Confident there. Livers is going to have to play a lot, and he's going to have to play well. Maybe Austin Davis can give him some minutes. I don't have a lot of confidence in John Teskey. So an interesting team, man. And again, one that I don't show a whole lot of apprehension about or come with a lot of apprehension to the season about, because I'm just too familiar with Beeline taking lemons and making lemonade out of it. He does it every time, and I would be shocked if he doesn't do it this time. In other words, expect Duncan Robinson to become a pull-up, jump shooting, defensive demon. Somebody that we're totally unfamiliar with coming into the season.
Let's switch gears, Dotman. Let's talk some football. And the energy level around the program coming back from Rome, heading into this season. Camp starts July 31st. So, we're taping this on June 27th. So that's only 34 days away. Players are now reporting for their 7-on-7s, the summer conditioning, etc. This is going to be probably the youngest team in the Power 5 this year, maybe the youngest team in college football. In fact, on last year's Phil Steele's experience chart in his preview, Ohio State was the least experienced team in the country. They made the playoff. Alabama and Clemson were both in the 100s out of 130 teams in experience on Phil Steele's chart. They played for the national championship. Clemson last year had 24 players of freshman eligibility in their two deep. Michigan right now looks like they'll have about 25 or 26. All 4 of the teams that made the playoffs last year in college football played at least 9 true freshmen in the playoffs. All 4 of them started a true freshman on the offensive line. But yet all of those schools also had an extra year or 2 or 3 to build that recruiting pipeline because their coaches had more longevity than Jim Harbaugh, who is just going into year 3. So, Mark, how much will the youth be served? How much will the youth be felt? What do you think is a reasonable expectation for this football team?
I know, I sense that they've done a really good job of increasing the talent pool. I love the athletes that he's been bringing in, even in those circumstances where they may not have been highly ranked or given associated with the 4 or 5 star type descriptions. And I right away, I was made aware that when it comes of Harbaugh's philosophy and his coaching staff's philosophy when it comes to recruiting players, and that is, if we don't think you got a shot at making the league, then we're not interested in you. So all these players that they've been recruiting are guys that they decided were worthy of a commitment of a scholarship because they believe that down the road they would be legitimate considerations by the NFL. I'm comfortable there. Youth being served, and you cite Clemson, you cite Alabama, you cite Ohio State as being able to buck the notion that they're inexperienced and therefore they're going to have a fall off in play. Alabama and Ohio State are recruiting at a different level than Michigan. So I can't necessarily assume that Michigan is going to be able to achieve the same kind of success that they did just because they don't recruit the same kind of, they have not recruited the same level. Clemson has recruited well too, and probably more so along the same lines, at least when it comes to rankings, as Michigan. So that's a good barometer there. What I saw key to the successes of those teams was, although relatively inexperienced, was good quarterback play. Mm-hmm. To answer your question as to whether or not Michigan is going to be similarly successful, I think it starts with Wilton Speight or whoever else they decide to put in that position. If they get good quarterback play, then I think they can be. I don't think there's any reason to dismiss the possibility that they'll be as successful as those inexperienced Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State teams. But it starts there. I expect an upgrade in O-line play just by default. They can't get much worse. They're going to have more talented players, I think, filling those positions. So I expect an upgrade there. The losses on defense are considerable, especially in the secondary. Oh, the D-line, man, they got some bodies there. They should be okay. Linebacker, they didn't. I thought that might have been a position where they could have used an upgrade in talent, but they were serviceable linebackers that they lost. The secondary folks, those are huge losses, especially given the way they want to play, which is bump and run, aggressive, man-to-man play, unless something changes in Don Brown's philosophy. But these guys coming in now, woefully inexperienced, are going to have to pick it up and be real good out the chute for them to be as successful as they were in the past. So, yeah, I see it. I can't dismiss out of hand the possibility that they may make the playoffs. I don't expect it because I'm not confident that the quarterback play is going to justify that kind of expectation. And I also think that their schedule is a beast. You got to go to Wisconsin. You got to go to Penn State. Those are two games that, especially the Penn State game. If Michigan beats Penn State at Penn State, I would consider that to be an enormous win. I don't expect coming into the season predicting that they'll beat Penn State at Penn State. Wisconsin, another tough game. If they can beat them there, then okay, cool. By the time that those games are played, then we should have a better feel for the team. Having Ohio State at home, although it's at home, Ohio State's going to be formidable. Michigan State at home, I don't expect a whole lot of Michigan State. Indiana on the road, tough game. Minnesota on the road, tough game. Especially for a team that's coming back as inexperienced as Michigan is. So I'm looking forward to the season, man, because we're going to find a whole lot about this coaching staff and their abilities, because they're going to be playing with a like you say, a youngin roster.
Two quick follow-ups on what you just said, on starting with the quarterbacks and the defensive backs. I want to follow up on. Let's go to the DBs first. Could an argument be made, though, that if you are that young, you're better off, frankly, playing bump and run? Hey, just go out there, run as fast as you can, cover that guy, as opposed to, here's our 9 coverages we're disguising, and you have this zone, and you read this key off of this guy, coming off of this slant, coming off of this angle, out of this formation. Isn't it almost easier, Mark, to ingratiate youth if you're just letting them, or if you're primarily, not just, but if you're primarily letting them use their athleticism as opposed to overthinking things? Does that make it a little bit easier to ingratiate those guys?
Well, you asked me, you know what I do. You asked me, can an argument be made? And I said, yeah, argument can be made. I don't know how good of an argument it is. Look, the other argument, the contrast to that is that that you can somehow protect the inexperienced player by putting them in a scheme that doesn't require that they go out there and make decisions on their own. So yeah, I can see this going both ways. And I can't tell you which one is more compelling than the other. I can see it. I just know that they create issues when they place inexperienced players on an island. And they do that on the regular, especially against teams that are coming back that are experienced, because they will be exploited. I don't know if you noticed, but if you go back to the Florida State game, for example, what's my man's name? Jordan Lewis.
Jordan Lewis in the slot gave up a touchdown on man-to-man coverage, which you almost never saw in 4 years.
Yeah, because they were committed to exploiting them. You go play our guys man to man. We got better players than you. We're going to show you that we got better players than you. So we're going to stand up to the challenge. Now there are a lot of Big Ten teams that can't play that way. But when you start playing with the big boys like the Clemsons and the Florida States and Ohio States, maybe now Penn State to a certain extent, Alabama for sure, and USC, etc. They're going to say, okay, put your guy on the island and we're going to dust him off. We're going to knock him off that island. So, yeah, the experienced player on an island against a good talent and a confident scheme, that can create a problem. Absolutely. But I respect the way they play their defensive backs, and I got to think that that's a great recruiting tool for them, because I think most defensive backs want to play man-to-man.
The quarterback play. I think there are some coaches, because of the acumen they have at a particular position or on one side of the ball, that it almost doesn't matter who the players are. There's a certain floor they won't go beneath. I think of, how many different defensive coordinators has Nick Saban had, except he's the best defensive coordinator in college football. So they're always going to be good, regardless of how well they recruit. It's just a matter of the floor is good. On top of that, how much better can they be? I look at offensive line at a school like Iowa. Their head coach might be the best offensive line coach in America. So it almost doesn't matter who the 5 guys are. They're always going to be good. It's just a matter of how great can they be. We may have the best quarterback coach in the country. So I think as long as Jim is there, our quarterback play, the floor will be good. I saw every snap Jake Rudock played at the University of Iowa, every single one. And by far the best football he played in his career up until that point combined was the last 6 games he played in a Michigan uniform for Jim Harbaugh, where he wasn't just a game manager, he could go out there and actually win games. So I think the quarterback play with Jim as the coach, regardless of the name, will always be sufficient. But my fear this year is sufficient was good enough last year with the experience around Wilton Speight. This year, I think he's going to have to actually be a playmaker. I don't think sufficient will be good enough. Can he take that next step?
He can. He can, because his coach is the kind of coach that's going to promote or facilitate that kind of step. I don't know. I don't know if he's capable physically or individually of doing that. He showed some flashes last year. I agree entirely with your description of Jake Rudock. I didn't think up until maybe the 5th or 6th game, I was off the grid. I'm talking to my guys. I'm saying, hey, look, man, he's going to lose them some games. And then he played in a way that I never expected him to play. And he played consistently well for those last 5 or 6 games, to the point where he got interest from the NFL. And if that's an indication as to what Harbaugh can do for a quarterback, then I would expect the same thing to happen with Wilton. I watched the spring game intently, and Wilton was the 3rd best quarterback in that spring game. We got better play out of O'Corn. We got better play out of Peters, and these were 2 guys that were facing the elements and the wind for the most part of that game, which was a deterrent to passing the football. They passed the ball as if that was no issue for them. Wilton seemed like he was a little unnerved out there, which made me unnerved or uncomfortable. I'm not convinced that Wilton necessarily will be the quarterback. We're talking about so we talk about generally about somebody taking the next step, and then the next step is, can somebody improve the play from last year that Wilton gave us? Yeah, I'm expecting that, whether that be from Wilton or whether that be from the 2 other guys.
Final question, Dot. We started off with you pointing out sort of a big picture perspective in your years being associated with Michigan athletics. So let's finish there. As you take a look now at the big picture, I'd not been to a Michigan game in several years since I moved away from the state. Took my son there last year for the opener against Hawaii, and I just could not believe how much better the stadium is, how much cooler the football experience is at the Big House compared to what I remembered as a teenager and a college kid that used to go to games there all the time. The massive renovations that have been done with the basketball program, the new deal with Nike, Jumpman, $51 million projection next year from the Big Ten Network. So where do you think things are right now? Is this sort of a Pax Romana, if you will, for Michigan fans? Is the best still yet to come? Are there still a couple things you have angst about? Give us sort of your big picture view of where things stand for the Maize and Blue as a whole.
Facility-wise and leadership-wise, when it comes from the administration and Ward Manuel, they are at a great place, and they will continue to get better. They made it clear, and the donors have made it clear that they want Michigan to be. When they talk leaders and best, they expect them to be the leaders and best when it comes to every aspect, and especially when it comes to academics, and also when it comes to athletics. So when it comes, and with Jim Harbaugh there, and the kind of folks that he's able to engage and to enlist on his staff, I'm confident that they will continue to be competent, beyond competent, competitive with the better teams or the better programs in the country. Basketball, it's really hard, Steve, to get people to understand just how successful the basketball team has been under Beeline, and how we should appreciate the success that Beeline has had, because they're not really familiar with the days where Michigan basketball wasn't very successful. Right now, we are a strong program basketball-wise. Now, I do know that I don't expect John Beeline to be around too much longer. How long that goes, I just don't know. But I envision within the next 3 or 4 years that there'll probably be a change when it comes to the head of the basketball program. And I expect, especially given Ward Manuel and the interest that Nike has in the Michigan program generally, that Michigan will be able to recruit and to retain a high-profile basketball coach. At one time, there were limitations based on facilities. At one time, there were limitations based on the reluctance to pay big dollar to a high-profile coach. Those are no longer the cases anymore. So I expect that when it comes to a Michigan sports fan, that you will have very few programs that will be able to pair a basketball and football program together and have the successes that Michigan will have down the road. I'm confident that's going to happen. And for fans, that's great. As you know, there's often a little overlap or cross-pollination when it comes to fandom. When you have a good football program, that often spreads over to the basketball program. But when you are successful with both, and right now off the top of my head, I can't think of any institution that has as successful a football and basketball program at the profile that Michigan has in the country. And when you throw in academics and the fact that we're graduating these folks at a prolific rate, then that's a package that I know that no other institution can put together that's on par with Michigan. So we're in a really good place right now. I'm going to have 2 kids at the University of Michigan this fall. Looking forward to having them there and enjoying the experience. My daughter just picked up her football ticket. She's excited. My son is a crazy fan right now, trying to figure out if we got a commitment from a basketball player, because he hits me up thinking that I know things that I really don't know. But he wants to. I'm the dad, so dad is supposed to know things naturally that nobody else knows. But it's a good time. It's a good time for me. It's a good time for me to be involved with reporting on Michigan football. I appreciate the opportunity that's been afforded to me by Sam Webb and the Go Blue Wolverine staff to be part of this process. And I appreciate you further involving me in the process by us having this discussion today. But yeah, good time for Michigan football and basketball. Good time for Michigan fans generally, especially given all the stuff that they've made available to them by virtue of the facilities that we have now developed, that they will continue to upgrade and develop down the road, and the commitment that the administration has shown to the athletic programs at the University of Michigan. Good, great time. And Harbaugh, look, man, Harbaugh is a different dude. I'm here in the belly of the beast in Lansing, and they want to talk all day long about, for example, they want to talk about the trip to Italy. Who's interested in the trip to Italy? And they commit 3 hours of their show to talk about the lack of interest in the trip to Italy.
Nobody cares. So we're going to talk about it all of afternoon drive. Yes. Yeah.
Good time, man. Good time. And there are very few folks that are going to be able to come to me and talking about having it better anywhere else for more than a half a second, because that just doesn't stand scrutiny. So good time, and a fun time, intriguing time, and I'm looking for better times down the road.
Well, just to show you how much things have changed, 3 years ago, for the first time in a half century, Michigan didn't go to a bowl game, make the NCAA tournament in in basketball, hockey, or baseball. That hadn't happened simultaneously in those 4 sports in like 50 years. This year, Michigan's the only school in the country to have players drafted by the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. That's all. That shows you right there how much things have changed just since 2014. Dotman, it's been great to have you with us. Mark from Go Blue Wolverine, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We'll do it again sometime, okay?
Also, take care. Enjoy your summer, Steve.
All right, you too. Take care. God bless. We'll come back. More of the Michigan podcast in a moment.
In 2001, he sat out almost all of last year with a hamstring injury. Abdul Khalik intercepted, and this will be a touchdown for Jacob Stewart, a reserve safety. Sophomore from Ypsilanti, Michigan, and it is a very different football game right now.
Well, we've talked about it all night. He had done such a great job of staying away from the bad play. He told us yesterday he has to live to punt. That time, he tried to make something happen when there was nothing there, Mike, and it cost him. Khalik, he's in the grass. He still throws it late.
Boy, you're so right. Living the punt should have been the mantra there.
Back again on this week's edition of the Michigan Podcast. Don't forget, no podcast next week with the holidays, so we're trying to jam-pack everything into this week's edition, including where we're going next. Our friends over at ESPN tweeted out some recent trends in college football, asking, which of these do you think will be broken in 2017? Let's quickly take these one by one. Let's start with Texas, which has only finished in the AP Top 25 once in the last 7 seasons. That's incredible. I think that's an easy call. Absolutely, Tom Herman is going to break that this year. Remember, average improvement of a Tom Herman coach team in his first year as an offensive coordinator or a head coach is 4.3 wins. So if they do that this year at Texas, they go from 5 to 9. You bet they'll be in the top 25. So I think Texas will snap that streak. Miami never reaching the ACC title game. That's hard to believe as well. I think they will snap that streak this year too, although I think the 2018 Canes will actually be better. But I think the 2017 Canes, particularly with some of the losses at Virginia Tech and they get the Hokies at home, I think they're the class of that division, and they will finally make it to the ACC championship. The next trend, Georgia hasn't won the SEC title since 2005. Well, if you think back to our pilot episode here on the Michigan podcast, you'll remember when we looked at the roster talent, the 4-year foundation of talent for every roster in major college football, Georgia was number 3 in the country, if I recall. Maybe they're even number 2. I know they were in the top 3. So the talent is there. You need Jacob Eason to take the next step as a quarterback. I think they're going to win the SEC East. Now, here's my fear, though, for them. I think it's really tough to beat Nick Saban playing a pro-style kind of attack because that's what he plays with better players. So I could see Kirby Smart guiding the Bulldogs to Atlanta in year 2, but I don't think they have enough yet to beat Alabama, as Keith Jackson used to say. So I'm going to say, sadly, for the Dogs, that streak without SEC titles will continue. Toledo, when I saw this stat, it blew me away. Toledo has not even made it to the MAC championship game since 2004. I mean, they're the biggest brand in the MAC. They've had several teams finish ranked, let alone not even making it to the MAC title game. I think with Logan Whiteside coming back, led the nation in touchdown passes last year, I think Toledo's going to easily snap that streak. And NC State has had one top 25 finish the last 14 years. I think that was with Russell Wilson, if I recall. This might be the team that can do it. Ryan Finley back at quarterback, Bradley Chubb, All-American, outstanding defensive front. They were close last year. Remember, they should have beaten Clemson in Death Valley. Shanked a couple of field goals at the end that would have won them that game. They named the score against North Carolina, their in-state rival, on the road to end last year, and that's when North Carolina had the number 2 pick in the entire NFL draft at quarterback. So I think NC State will snap that streak as well. I think they will finish in the top 25 for only the second time in 14 or now 15 years. More streaks, according to ESPN. Kentucky, how about this? Kentucky football has lost at least 5 games every year since 1985, Bowling for Soup. Since 1985, 5 games every year. And I think the streak will continue. I mean, there's a reason. Mark Stoops, the coach of Kentucky, there's a reason he gave his team rings for winning 7 games last year. That doesn't happen very often down there in Bluegrass Nation. So I think Kentucky will get to a bowl game again, but I think they're going to lose 5+ games again. Arkansas has not finished in the top 25 since 2011. That's a program with a lot of pride, a lot of tradition. The problem with them, and Brett Bielema, I like the way he coaches. I like his style of play. The problem is Bielema and his sort of up-yours persona, it was unique in the Big Ten at the time he was here. That's why he clashed with Urban Meyer when Meyer came into the league, because he was the only other coach who kind of had that persona. But now we got Urban Meyer, we got Jim, we got Franklin. You got several coaches that kind of have that and the horse you rode in on mentality in the Big Ten. You know, and everybody in the SEC has a coach like that. Mississippi State has a coach, has an up-yours coach. And so Bielema's, you know, his shtick, if you will, it's not new. And plus his style of offense, he's essentially trying to beat LSU and Alabama and schools like that with their style of play with not as good of recruits. I think that streak continues. I don't think they finish in the top 25 this year as well. Now, they could do it back in 2011 when Petrino was there and they're running that air raid offense, and that's something new to prepare for when you had guys like Ryan Mallett there, but they don't have that now. And so I think Arkansas will, again, get their 6 or 7 wins, but not finish in the top 25. 2 more trends to take a look at. Middle Tennessee State hasn't won a conference title since 2006. I think this may be the year they break that streak. I think they're going to be one of the better group of 5 teams. And then Iowa State's last winning season came in 2009. By the way, that was Tom Herman's first year as offensive coordinator at Iowa State. They went from 3 wins to 7. I like the way their team finished the year. I think they returned like 85% of their offensive output from a year ago. They don't have much on defense, although It's a league that doesn't play much defense. I think it's possible Matt Campbell, who just came over from Toledo in year 2, I think it's possible he could get to 6 wins in a bowl game. I think more likely he gets to 5. But a winning season, I think they're probably still a year or 2 away from that. So sadly for the Cyclones, I think that streak's going to continue.
At the 25-yard line, gain of 31 yards. What is Michigan doing?
They are now running the ball. They're blocking. They are executing their offense like they have all season long. Now, hey, this is one of those that you got to remember how many times you're going to hand the thing off. The defense starts to pursue. You'll see everybody run to the top of the screen. Reverse field. They try to go back and recover. By that time, Michigan's blockers were all in line over there, and Alexander couldn't outrun the angle.
This week's Twitter poll results, I analyzed for you last week what I thought was Michigan's toughest game of the year, and I thought it was Penn State. 61% of you, though, that are following us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast, you disagree. And you think Ohio State will be Michigan's toughest game to win this fall. If you want to vote in this week's Twitter poll, don't forget at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. That's where you can also send us questions or via Facebook as well. This week's question of the week comes from Jacob Hibbert. He writes, is the Wisconsin hype real, or is it due to not that many personnel losses or their easy schedule? Yes. Now, Wisconsin's personnel losses are not significant in number. I think they're returning 15 or 16 starters, but they're definitely significant in impact. TJ Watts, for example, gone. Sojourn Shelton, by far their best defensive back last year, also gone. Ryan Ramczyk, by far their best offensive lineman last year, gone. Top 2 tailbacks, gone, although I'm not so much concerned about that because Wisconsin, going back to when they had Brett Moss, whoever starts there is getting 1,000 yards just by showing up on campus. So I'm not so much concerned about that. So yes, the losses are not significant in volume, Jacob, but they are definitely significant in terms of impact. And plus, that Wisconsin schedule, just as last year's schedule didn't turn out to be as hard as we thought, I don't think this year's schedule is as easy as we think. And I know I said it earlier in the podcast, but I would watch out for that non-conference game early in the year at BYU. Be very careful. And there's a lot of games for Wisconsin that are going to be 24-21, 21-17 type of games. And Alex Hornibrook, who last year they tried to get the job to before he gave it up because he wasn't good enough, he's got to take a much bigger step, sort of like Clayton Thorson took for Northwestern. He didn't quite live up to the hype his redshirt freshman year. And then last year you saw him really develop as a sophomore. Alex Hornibrook needs to do that this year for Wisconsin. And finally, this past week, what's become now a big annual moment in the Steve Deace household. Seneca Wallace, the former Iowa State quarterback, former NFL quarterback, puts on a football camp in my hometown of Des Moines, Iowa, each and every June. My 10-year-old son, Noah, looks forward to this every single year. And I took a little footage of Noah taking down the tackling dummies last week at the Seneca Wallace football camp. Check this out.
Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the, no, here comes the, oh, here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the, no, here comes the, oh, here comes the, y'all don't really want it.
Love that. I love the shove away when he throws it away afterwards, like nothing. And I watched him do several drills. I'm coaching his flag football team this fall. I may have to take him aside. He's, doing the chest bumps and, he's got a little showmanship to him. I'm not really sure where he picks that up. Don't know of any bad influences at home. But anyway, Noah lowering the boom is this week's final word on the Michigan Podcast. And this is our final word on the Michigan Podcast for 2 more weeks because of the holiday. Don't forget, in the meantime, subscribe here on YouTube. Share the link as well as subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Follow us on Twitter @Michigan Podcast. Go Blue. We'll see you in 2 weeks.